Welcome, friends. Come on in, get comfortable, and allow the noise of the day to loosen its grip for a while. Whether you're curled beneath a blanket, resting your head against a familiar pillow, or simply sitting somewhere quiet while the evening settles around you, I am glad you are here. Perhaps there is only a small lamp glowing nearby now. Perhaps the room has already fallen mostly dark, and perhaps the world outside your window has begun to feel distant and still. This is a place for slowing down, for listening without effort, and for letting history unfold at the gentle pace of firelight. So, before we begin, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy these journeys into the past, and let me know where you're listening from tonight and what time it is where you are. There is something comforting in imagining people scattered across different towns, countries, and time zones, all sharing the same quiet hour together. Tonight, we are stepping back into Tudor England, into a world of timbered houses and fortified manor homes, of muddy roads winding between villages, of stone churches standing dark against the evening sky, and of bells measuring time long before anyone carries a watch in a pocket. Our attention will not remain in crowded council chambers or noisy tournament grounds. Instead, it will move toward a quieter part of Tudor life, the hours after daylight fades, when noblewomen gradually leave the public world behind and prepare themselves for the long, uncertain darkness before dawn. Evening in a prosperous Tudor household does not arrive all at once. It gathers slowly around the buildings. Beyond the manor walls, winter fields fade from brown to grey, while smoke from cottage chimneys settles low over a nearby village. Somewhere along the road, a late traveller may be searching for an inn before the gates are barred. In the distance, a church bell sounds the hour, its tone carrying across damp fields and bare trees. Inside the noble household, however, the day continues a little longer. Servants begin moving through passages with candles, lamps, and pieces of glowing charcoal. Shutters are drawn across windows where glass exists, though even wealthy households may still have rooms fitted with smaller panes, horn, or other coverings in less important spaces. Heavy curtains help hold back draughts, and doors of oak are closed firmly against corridors that can become bitterly cold once the sun disappears. No one can quite agree on how uniformly these evening routines were followed across every noble household, because Tudor homes differed greatly in wealth, region, architecture, and personal habit. Yet surviving household accounts and inventories suggest a world in which darkness itself required preparation. Candles are precious enough to notice. In grand chambers, beeswax candles may burn with a cleaner, sweeter light than the cheaper tallow candles used elsewhere. Beeswax costs more, and its presence carries a quiet suggestion of rank. Servants trim wicks carefully, because wax should not be wasted. A noblewoman may sit beside several candles while attendants work nearby, but even in wealthy surroundings there is nothing resembling the bright, effortless illumination of a modern room. Much of the household remains in shadow. Firelight flickers across plaster walls, carved furniture, painted cloths, and wooden chests. Rushes may cover parts of the floor, sometimes mixed with sweet-smelling herbs, rosemary, lavender, meadowsweet, or other plants could be scattered among them. Though historians continue to debate how common some of these fragrant arrangements truly were outside particular households and seasons, the scent of the evening is therefore complicated. There is wood smoke from the hearth, warm wax from candles, damp wool drying near the fire, traces of supper, perhaps a little ale spilled earlier in the hall, and the faint herbal smell rising whenever someone crosses the rush-covered floor. For a noblewoman, night begins before she reaches her bedchamber. Her place in the household requires visibility. At supper she may sit according to rank, surrounded by relatives, guests, officers, ladies, servants, and perhaps visiting clerics. Meals in prosperous homes can include bread, roasted meat, pottage, fish on required fasting days, sauces heavy with spice, and ale or wine depending on status and circumstance. Food is served on trenchers or plates, and hands remain important tools at the table despite the increasing presence of knives and spoons. Yet evening is not simply a time for eating. It is also a time when the household observes itself. Who sits near whom matters, who receives the better dishes matters, who speaks to a visiting noble, who is ignored, who appears pleased, who seems tired, and who leaves early may all be noticed in a society where reputation travels quickly along roads between castles, abbeys, courtly households, and market towns. A Tudor noblewoman therefore rarely vanishes casually from company. Her withdrawal from the hall may be gradual. A lady-in-waiting or trusted attendant remains nearby. Servants anticipate what will be required in the private chamber: more wood for the fire, fresh water, linen cloths, candles, perhaps a warming pan, perhaps a small evening drink. The bedchamber itself is not necessarily private in the modern sense. That distinction will become important as the night deepens. For now, the household is still awake. Footsteps continue along the passages. Somewhere below, kitchen servants clean vessels and carry away remains from supper. Dogs may settle near the warmth of the hall. A steward checks doors and stores. Stable hands attend horses in the outer buildings, where the smell of straw and leather mixes with the colder air. Beyond the walls, the road has almost disappeared into darkness. A watchman crosses the courtyard beneath the pale sky, carrying a lantern whose light barely reaches the stones ahead of him. From a nearby chapel or parish church, another bell may sound, reminding everyone that Tudor time is shaped not only by work but by prayer. For noblewomen, this movement from public evening into private night is more than a change of room. It is the beginning of a sequence of rituals: practical, religious, medical, fashionable, and sometimes superstitious. Some are meant to protect the body, some are meant to preserve beauty, some are intended to guard the soul, and some arise from fears that feel strangely intimate even after 5 centuries: fear of illness, fear of sleeplessness, fear of bad dreams, fear of cold rooms, and fear of what might happen while the household lies quiet. For the moment, however, nothing alarming disturbs the night. The fires remain steady. Candlelight trembles against the walls. Outside, mist gathers over the fields, and the last sounds of the village begin to fade. Within the manor, a noblewoman prepares to leave the great hall behind. Her public day is nearly finished. Her private night is only beginning. The great hall does not fall silent the moment supper ends. For a while, it remains the warmest and most inhabited place in the house, a long chamber of voices, benches, smoke, serving vessels, and firelight. Servants move between tables collecting trenchers and cups. Someone pushes another log onto the hearth. A dog shifts closer to the warmth beneath a bench. Guests linger because leaving the hall means exchanging its crowded heat for passages where cold air waits behind every door. For a Tudor noblewoman, withdrawing from this space is a small ritual of its own. She does not simply rise and disappear. Her departure reflects rank, age, family position, the presence of guests, and the customs of the household. A young unmarried gentlewoman may remain with older female relatives. A married noblewoman overseeing a large estate may withdraw accompanied by several attendants. A woman close to the royal court lives under still more elaborate expectations, where almost every gesture can become visible to someone whose opinion matters. The household watches without appearing to watch. In this world, status is expressed through space. The closer a person is allowed to approach the private rooms of a noble family, the more privileged that person is likely to be. The great hall is public by household standards. Beyond it come smaller rooms, withdrawing chambers, closets, galleries, and bedchambers. Each doorway can represent another layer of trust. No one can quite agree on how rigidly this arrangement worked in every Tudor manor, because houses were altered over generations and customs varied widely. Yet the general pattern is clear enough: privacy grows as one travels inward. A noblewoman may first move into a smaller withdrawing chamber, sometimes called a withdrawing room or privy chamber in more elaborate households. The very idea of withdrawing describes what is happening. The larger company is left behind, but complete solitude is still unusual. A handful of women may remain with her. These can include ladies of comparable gentle birth, female relatives, chamber servants, or trusted attendants who have spent years in the same household. Their work is not merely domestic. They carry messages, manage clothing, safeguard small possessions, observe moods, and sometimes become witnesses to matters that never appear in official records. A woman of high rank may know hundreds of people, yet her nighttime world can depend on only a few. The movement away from the hall is slow. Candle-bearers go ahead where necessary, as Tudor corridors are not built for effortless nighttime travel. Steps may be uneven, floors may creak, doorways can be narrow, especially in older buildings modified rather than rebuilt. In a castle, Thick stone walls create passages where the cold seems stored permanently. In a newer brick manor, rooms may be brighter by day, but at night they still depend on flame. Beeswax candles burn in the wealthier rooms, while cheaper tallow lights may serve servants and secondary spaces. Tallow gives off more odour and smoke, and a badly maintained wick can sputter. A practical attendant keeps a pair of snuffers nearby to trim the blackened wick and prevent the flame from smoking too heavily. It is a small detail, but Tudor night is filled with such tasks. Fire must be fed, candles must be trimmed, doors must be checked, water must be carried. Clothes must be aired. Nothing about darkness is automatic. Some noble households keep a small fire burning in a private chamber, especially in cold weather, though fuel is expensive enough that even the wealthy think about its use. Wood, charcoal, and coal are all used in different places and periods. In regions where timber has become costly, the economics of warmth can shape household routines more than modern listeners might expect. A chamber servant may arrive ahead of her mistress to stir embers and add fuel. Another carries a ewer of water and places it beside a basin. Linen cloths are folded nearby. A stool may be pulled closer to the hearth. If the weather is bitter, a fur-lined mantle remains useful even indoors. The noblewoman has left the ceremonial centre of the household, but she has not escaped ceremony. There are still expectations governing who sits, who stands, who assists, and who waits. Etiquette is less a written list than a shared understanding. Servants learn it through repetition. Younger ladies learn by observation. Mistakes can be embarrassing because rank must appear effortless, even when maintaining it requires constant effort from everyone around it. One lesser-known habit of elite households is the care taken over keys. A senior woman, housekeeper, chamberer, or trusted servant may carry keys to chests, cupboards, linen stores, or private rooms. Keys represent responsibility as much as access. In a society where clothing, spices, silverware, medicines, and fine linen are expensive, locking them away is simply sensible. A noblewoman's private chamber therefore contains more controlled space than its soft hangings might suggest. There may be coffers with clothing, small boxes for jewels, cabinets for devotional objects, and chests holding linen. A servant who knows which key opens which chest possesses practical knowledge of the household's hidden geography. Some chroniclers claimed that noble houses were full of intrigue behind closed doors, though their stories often exaggerate scandal for effect. The quieter truth is probably more interesting. Most evenings consist of routine, fatigue, small instructions, and familiar faces. Perhaps a letter is read aloud. Perhaps an account is discussed. Perhaps a servant reports that a guest's room is ready. Perhaps a lady asks whether the chapel candles have been prepared for morning prayers. Conversation may continue while the household slowly settles. Outside, the manor yard is changing too. Stable doors are secured, horses stamp in straw, a groom checks harness or blankets before leaving. Kitchen waste is carried out. The outer gate may be closed or watched more carefully after dark. A porter remains important in households large enough to maintain one, because travellers can still arrive unexpectedly. Roads are uncertain after sunset. Mud, theft, broken wheels, swollen streams, and simple darkness make late journeys dangerous. A traveller reaching a manor after nightfall may hope for hospitality, but custom does not require every stranger to be trusted. Wealthy households must balance generosity with caution. For women inside, those dangers are mostly heard rather than seen. A distant knock at a gate, a horse arriving late, a servant crossing the courtyard with a lantern. Such sounds remind the household that the walls are doing more than marking status. They also separate the warm interior from a dark countryside where roads fade into fields and forests. As the noblewoman moves deeper into her apartments, the sound of the great hall diminishes behind her. Voices blur, then vanish. Only the quieter noises remain: the faint crack of a hearth, fabric brushing against a wooden chest, footsteps passing beyond an oak door, perhaps rain beginning softly against shutters. Somewhere in the distance, bells mark another hour. The public performance of the evening is ending. Jewels are still fastened, heavy sleeves still hang from the shoulders, pins still hold careful arrangements in place. But the servants closest to the noblewoman are beginning to prepare for the moment when rank, fashion, and ceremony will literally be taken apart piece by piece. For now, the doors close behind the final attendants allowed to remain. the great hall has become another world, and in the smaller pool of candlelight beyond it, the private rituals of the Tudor night draw closer. Behind the closed door of the private chamber, the noblewoman's appearance begins to change. For most of the day, clothing has done more than keep her warm. It has declared family wealth, marital status, taste, rank, and respectability to anyone who knows how to read fabric and form. Fine wool, silk, velvet, embroidery, fur, pearls, metal thread, and carefully chosen colours all carry meaning. Yet by night, these layers must be removed one by one, and the process is far less simple than slipping out of a single gown. An attendant approaches first to deal with the outer garments. Depending on the decade, the woman's exact clothing can vary considerably. Tudor fashion changes noticeably between the early reign of Henry VIII and the final years of Elizabeth I. No one can quite agree on a single costume that represents the entire century, because silhouettes, sleeves, necklines, headwear, and methods of construction all develop over time. Still, throughout much of the period, elite dress consists of multiple fitted and structured layers that require assistance. The outer gown may be heavy enough to make that assistance welcome. Velvet and thick wool become tiring after hours of wear. Fur linings add warmth but also weight. Sleeves may be separate or partly detachable, attached with ties, pins, or other fastenings depending on the garment. Decorative pieces can be moved from one outfit to another because expensive cloth is too valuable to treat casually. The first task is often the removal of jewellery. A chain is lifted carefully from the neck. Rings may be taken from the fingers and placed inside a small casket. Brooches, pendants, girdle ornaments, and jewelled pins are handled with particular attention. A pearl lost somewhere among floor rushes could represent more than inconvenience. Items of value disappear into locked chests or boxes. Keys matter again. A trusted attendant may know where the jewel casket is kept and who is permitted to touch it. In the largest houses, possessions are recorded in inventories with surprising detail. A gown might be described by fabric, colour, trimming, and decoration because clothing is property of considerable financial importance. The noblewoman then stands while her attendants loosen the gown. There are no modern zippers. Fastenings include hooks, eyes, pins, points, laces, and ties. Some garments fit closely enough that the wearer cannot comfortably undo them alone. The ritual is therefore cooperative. One woman may work at the back while another handles sleeves or jewellery. Someone folds a removed garment rather than dropping it carelessly. Another examines the hem where mud has dried from an afternoon walk across the courtyard or garden. Tudor noblewomen may live in magnificent houses, but mud is democratic. A carriage cannot bring its passenger directly into every chamber, and even the grounds of a great estate become wet, rutted, and filthy during poor weather. Skirts can pick up dirt despite servants' efforts. The lower edge of a gown may need brushing once dry, while delicate fabrics require particular care. Clothing is rarely washed in the way a modern wardrobe is washed. Fine wool and silk can be damaged by soaking. Instead, garments may be brushed, aired, spot-cleaned, perfumed, or professionally treated. Linen worn close to the skin is washed more regularly, which helps explain why clean linen itself becomes an important sign of bodily cleanliness. Once the outer gown is removed, more layers appear beneath. A kirtle or fitted undergown may remain. In later Tudor decades, structured bodies or bodices help shape the torso. Farthingales, introduced into England from continental fashions, can support skirts outward from the body, though their use changes with fashion and status. Removing such structures can bring physical relief. A noblewoman who has spent hours sitting upright through supper, receiving visitors, attending chapel, or managing household business finally feels the weight loosen around her. Even now, historians continue to debate exactly how uncomfortable Tudor clothing was in ordinary use. Popular imagination sometimes makes every fitted bodice into an instrument of torture, but surviving garments and written evidence suggests something more nuanced. Properly fitted clothing can support the body effectively, though badly fitted, heavily structured, or prolonged formal dress is certainly capable of becoming tiring. Comfort is relative. A woman accustomed from childhood to structured clothing may not experience it as strange at all. Still, evening allows the body to relax. Pins are collected carefully. Losing them is wasteful because even small metal objects have value. Some are stuck temporarily into pincushions or pieces of cloth. Laces are rolled or tied so that they do not tangle. A servant may check for tears. Seams endure strain where sleeves meet bodices, where skirts drag across floors, and where hooks pull against fabric. Repairs are part of the constant maintenance of elite wardrobes. Skilled sewing is not merely decorative work, it preserves wealth. Near the hearth, candlelight moves across the surfaces of folded cloth. The room smells faintly of warmed wool, wax, and smoke. Beyond the shuttered windows, wind pushes through leafless branches. Somewhere farther away, a dog barks once and then becomes quiet again. Inside, the transformation continues. The noblewoman may now be wearing primarily linen and simpler garments. A smock or shift lies closest to the skin. Linen absorbs perspiration and body oils and can be laundered more easily than expensive outer fabrics. A clean shift before bed, where available, offers a freshness that Tudor people value highly. Laundry itself is laborious. Linen must be soaked, washed, beaten, rinsed, dried, and sometimes bleached in sunlight. In a large household, enormous quantities of sheets, shirts, shifts, napkins, table linen, and towels pass through the hands of laundresses. For that reason, an immaculate piece of white linen represents hours of hidden work. There are also beliefs associated with clothing after dark. Some households avoid leaving certain garments in careless disorder, partly for practical reasons and partly because nighttime encourages superstition. Objects left upside down, shoes placed strangely, or clothing arranged improperly might acquire meaning in folk belief. Though surviving accounts rarely tell us how seriously noblewomen themselves accepted such ideas, some chroniclers dismissed these habits as foolishness. Others recorded them precisely because people continued practicing them. The final formal pieces are set aside for airing or storage. Fur may need protection from moths. Sweet-smelling herbs, cedar, or aromatic substances can be kept near fabrics in hopes of discouraging pests. Lavender is often associated with linen, though the exact combinations differ from household to household. By now the noblewoman's shape has changed completely. The imposing figure who occupied the great hall beneath layers of velvet and ornament has become someone far less ceremonial. Her shoulders are lighter. Her movement is easier. The social armour of the day rests folded inside chests or across the hands of servants. Yet the work is not finished. Hair remains pinned. The face still carries the traces of the day. Hands may smell faintly of metal from rings, smoke from hearths, or herbs handled at supper. On a nearby table, an attendant has already placed a basin and ewer. Water may be only modestly warm. A clean linen cloth waits beside it. The fire settles lower as the household grows quieter, and somewhere beyond the thick walls another bell moves through the darkness. Clothing has been removed. The body beneath it must now be prepared for sleep. The basin waiting on the table is small by modern standards. There is no porcelain sink fixed into the wall, no tap waiting to release an endless stream of hot water, and certainly no private bathroom hidden beyond the bedchamber door. Water has arrived here because someone carried it. Perhaps a servant drew it from a well or cistern earlier in the evening. Perhaps it was warmed near a kitchen fire and brought upstairs in a metal or ceramic vessel. Every cupful has weight, and every journey up a staircase requires effort. For this reason alone, nighttime washing is usually a measured affair. The noblewoman approaches the basin while an attendant pours from the ewer. Water splashes softly against metal or glazed pottery. A linen cloth lies folded beside it, along with soap if the household chooses to use it, scented preparations if they are available, and perhaps a small bottle of rosewater. Tudor people are often described as though they avoided cleanliness entirely. The reality is quieter and more complicated. Full immersion bathing is less common than in many modern societies, especially in elite domestic life. But washing parts of the body can be an ordinary habit. Faces and hands receive particular attention. Linen worn against the skin is changed and laundered. Hair is combed. Clothing is aired. Rooms are swept or covered with fresh rushes. Fragrant herbs are used. People notice unpleasant smells and attempt to manage them, even when their understanding of hygiene differs greatly from ours. No one can quite agree on how frequently individual noblewomen washed from head to foot. Personal routines leave uneven traces in the historical record, and practice varies according to season, health, household resources, and personal preference. At night, however, hands are an obvious place to begin. They have touched cups, knives, fabric, doors, letters, animals, prayer books, and the hands of other people. At supper they may have helped manage food even in refined company. Washing before retiring is therefore both practical and pleasant. The noblewoman dips her hands into the basin or allows water to be poured over them. Soap in Tudor England can be made from fats combined with alkaline substances derived from ash. Better quality soaps are available through trade, and scented varieties become desirable among prosperous households. Yet soap is not necessarily used on the face every night. Water, cloth, floral preparations, and herbal mixtures can serve instead. Rose water is especially valued. Made by distilling rose petals, it appears in culinary, medicinal, and cosmetic and household contexts. A little may be used to freshen the skin or scent linen. Other aromatic waters can include rosemary or lavender depending on what is available and what recipes a household follows. The distinction between medicine and cosmetics is remarkably blurred. A preparation intended to improve the complexion may also be described as cooling, strengthening, drying, or balancing. Tudor medicine still rests heavily upon theories inherited from antiquity, particularly the belief that health depends on the proper balance of bodily humours. Heat and cold, moisture and dryness matter deeply within this system. Bathing can therefore seem medically significant rather than merely refreshing. Some physicians warn that warm water may open the pores and allow dangerous air into the body. Others recommend baths for specific conditions. Opinions change according to circumstance. Some chroniclers claim that bathing during outbreaks of disease could leave the body vulnerable, while medical texts sometimes prescribe carefully prepared baths containing herbs. Even now, historians continue to debate how strongly ordinary people followed such advice in daily practice. A noblewoman may not think of her evening basin as a medical treatment at all. She simply knows what feels familiar. A cloth is dampened and passed across the face, neck, and perhaps arms. The water quickly loses its warmth. In winter, this matters. Stone walls hold cold stubbornly, and even rooms with fireplaces develop chilly corners. The servant tending the hearth understands this. Another log is shifted into place. Sparks rise briefly. The noblewoman may remain wrapped in a loose gown, mantle, or fur-lined garment while washing so that only the necessary skin is exposed to the cold. Privacy during such washing is limited to trusted attendants rather than absolute solitude. These women have seen their mistress tired, ill, pregnant, grieving, angry, and half-dressed. They know which basin she prefers, how warm she likes the water, whether she dislikes a particular scent, and which remedies she requests when her skin becomes sore in winter. Such knowledge rarely earns a place in grand chronicles, yet it shapes every evening. Some households keep cloths specifically for wiping the body. Others employ scented powders. Bran, oatmeal, herbs, or ground plant materials may appear in cleansing and cosmetic preparations. Recipes copied into household books combine ingredients that seem sensible beside others that appear strange to modern eyes. Honey, egg white, vinegar, herbs, flowers, animal fats, and various mineral substances can all find their way into skin treatments. A particularly persistent belief concerns complexion. Elite women are expected to protect the face from weather and sunlight, partly because pale skin suggests a life removed from outdoor labour. This does not mean every noblewoman spends her evenings applying elaborate cosmetics, but the condition of the face certainly carries social meaning. Hands do as well. Rough skin can be softened with oils, fats, or ointments. A woman whose household produces beeswax may have access to preparations combining wax with oils or herbs. Recipes vary, and no one can say with certainty how widely each one is actually used. There are practical concerns beyond beauty. Fleas and lice are familiar enemies in households of every rank. Washing alone cannot eliminate them from a world filled with straw mattresses, layered fabrics, animals, wooden furniture, and shared spaces. Clothing is brushed, bedding aired, herbs scattered, and rooms cleaned partly in the hope of controlling pests. One lesser-known practice is the use of aromatic substances not simply for pleasure, but because pleasant smells are believed to help defend against unhealthy air. Disease is often associated with corruption in the atmosphere. Bad smells therefore seem dangerous in themselves. Pomanders filled with aromatic ingredients, herb bundles, incense, or floral waters belong to a broader effort to surround the body with cleaner or sweeter air. This belief will follow the noblewoman deeper into the night. For now, the basin water has clouded slightly. The cloth is wrung out. A servant replaces it with a dry piece of linen. Outside the shutters, rain begins gently, touching the roof in a steady rhythm. Water runs from the eaves into the dark courtyard below. Far beyond the manor, muddy roads shine faintly beneath a hidden moon, and a village has almost entirely gone to sleep. Inside, the noblewoman dries her hands slowly. The ritual has required perhaps only a basin or two, yet behind those few minutes stand wells, fires, servants, laundry, trade, medicine, custom, and generations of inherited belief. The ewer is carried away, but another task remains. Pins still hold the hair in place, and beneath caps, braids, ribbons, and carefully arranged strands lies an entirely separate world of nighttime care. The removal of the final hairpin can feel almost as significant as the loosening of a heavy gown. Throughout the day, a Tudor noblewoman's hair is rarely left entirely free. Depending on age, marital status, fashion, and the particular decade, it may be braided, coiled, pinned, covered, or arranged beneath a hood, cap, or other form of headwear. Fashion changes considerably across the Tudor century, yet one principle remains familiar: hair is not merely personal, it is social. For married women especially, covering the hair in public is often associated with modesty and respectable appearance, although elite fashion becomes increasingly elaborate and sometimes reveals more of the hair than strict moralists might prefer. At night, these arrangements finally come apart. An attendant begins by removing the outer head covering, a French hood, gable hood, coif, cap, or simpler linen covering may leave marks where it is pressed against the scalp for hours. Decorative pins are taken out one by one and placed somewhere safe. Ribbons are untied, braids are loosened, the hair falls gradually over the shoulders. It may be much longer than modern portraits suggest. Women commonly grow their hair long, even though much of it remains hidden or arranged during the day. Long hair offers possibilities for braiding and shaping, but it also demands care. Washing it frequently in cold weather would be inconvenient, slow, and uncomfortable, especially when drying must happen beside a fire rather than beneath warm moving air. Combing therefore becomes one of the most important parts of nighttime grooming. A comb may be made from wood, bone, horn, ivory, or another hard material. Wealthier women can possess beautifully worked examples, sometimes stored with other personal items. Fine-toothed combs serve a purpose beyond neatness. They also hunt for lice. Parasites are not confined to the poor. A noble household contains people, animals, bedding, upholstered furniture, fur, wool, linen, rushes, and countless places where insects can hide. Wealth creates cleaner clothing and more servants to maintain rooms, but it does not create a sealed environment. No one can quite agree on exactly how common lice were among Tudor noblewomen, because intimate grooming problems are rarely recorded with precision. Yet the existence of fine combs, delousing practices, and repeated remedies makes it clear that parasites are familiar enough to require attention. The attendant draws the comb slowly through the hair. Tangling is worked out patiently rather than violently. Long hair can break when treated roughly, and thick hair may require sectioning. A woman with an elaborate daytime arrangement has already spent considerable time having it put up. Taking it down has its own rhythm. There is an intimacy to this work. The mistress sits near the fire while another woman stands behind her, close enough to see the roots of her hair and the skin of her scalp. They may have known one another for years. The attendant notices dryness, soreness, dandruff, or insects long before anyone else would. Some treatments are simple. A little oil may be applied to dry hair. Herbal rinses or scented waters can be used on occasion. Rosemary appears repeatedly in household traditions involving hair and scalp care, while other plants are believed to strengthen hair, improve its smell, or darken particular shades. Recipes become more adventurous when hair loss is involved. Household remedy collections from the broader period contain mixtures involving herbs, oils, animal fats, honey, ashes, wine, vinegar, and substances that a modern person would hesitate to place anywhere near the head. Some recipes promise to encourage growth, others claim to kill lice, a few attempt both. Whether such remedies actually work is another matter entirely. Even now, historians continue to debate how often written recipes were used exactly as recorded. A household book may preserve a remedy copied from another source, recommended by a neighbour, inherited from an older relative, or written down simply because someone believed it worth remembering. The presence of a recipe does not prove that every lady of the house submitted to it willingly. Still, certain ideas recur often enough to suggest genuine practice. Vinegar, for example, can appear in cleansing preparations. Its sharp smell may seem unpleasant, but it has practical value in some contexts. Combing remains more reliable for removing lice and their eggs, particularly when performed regularly. There is also concern about the colour and texture of hair. Beauty ideals differ over the century, but lighter and reddish shades enjoy periods of fashionable appeal, especially in the later Tudor court. Some women may use herbal or chemical preparations in attempts to alter colour. Exposure to sunlight can also lighten hair, though deliberately arranging this would be easier in warmer climates than in damp English weather. At night, however, fashion gives way to preservation. Hair that has been fully loosened may be braided again, this time much more simply. A loose nighttime braid keeps it from tangling against bedding. It also prevents long strands from becoming trapped beneath the sleeper's shoulders or caught around clothing. An attendant might divide it carefully and tie the end with a ribbon or thread. Then comes the night covering. A simple linen coif or cap helps contain the hair while sleeping. It offers warmth, keeps oils from transferring as freely onto pillows or bedding, and prevents loose strands from becoming troublesome during the night. In a cold chamber, warmth alone makes the cap sensible. Modern sleepers sometimes imagine that bedclothes end at the shoulders, but Tudor rooms can become remarkably cold before dawn. A linen cap is thin, yet anything that reduces the chill around the head can feel welcome. Some people also believe that leaving the head improperly covered during sleep risks illness. Tudor medicine pays close attention to draughts, cold air, and the balance of bodily qualities. An uncovered head near a poorly sealed window might therefore seem less like personal preference and more like unnecessary danger. Folklore adds another layer. Hair itself can carry symbolic importance. Detached hair may be treated carefully because parts of the body sometimes appear in folk practices, charms, and magical beliefs. Stories circulate about hair being used in love magic, curses, or protective rites. Although it is difficult to know how seriously any particular noblewoman accepts such tales, those who recorded these beliefs never fully agreed on where ordinary custom ended and superstition began. The church condemns magical practices, yet people continue to live in a world where prayer, medicine, folklore, and inherited household wisdom overlap. A woman may mock one charm and quietly trust another. She may reject a village healer's superstition while still keeping a particular herb near her bed because her mother always did. Night encourages such contradictions. The daylight household is governed by visible rules. Darkness feels less certain. By now, the noblewoman's hair lies in a simple braid beneath clean linen. The ornate public arrangement has vanished. Just as the velvet gown and jewellery have vanished, a comb rests on the table beside a small container of ointment. The attendant gathers fallen strands from the cloth around her mistress's shoulders. They are not simply brushed onto the floor. In a carefully managed chamber, even something as small as loose hair may be collected and discarded deliberately. The fire has sunk lower. Rain still moves over the roof, softer now, while water murmurs somewhere in the courtyard gutters. Beyond the manor walls, the fields are black and empty. The parish church stands amongst sleeping houses, and the roads between villages have disappeared beneath mist. Inside, candlelight settles over the noblewoman's uncovered face. Her hair has been tended, but the face itself still belongs partly to the daylight world. On the table, beside the comb and linen cloth, small bottles and jars wait quietly in the glow. The small bottles and jars on the table belong to a world where beauty, medicine, rank, and health overlap so completely that separating one from another is not always possible. A Tudor noblewoman does not necessarily think of her face as something to be made up in the modern sense. Instead, complexion is part of a wider idea of appearance. Smooth skin, pale skin, clear skin, and skin free from visible blemishes can suggest youth, gentility, health, and freedom from outdoor labour. A face darkened by constant sun or marked by rough weather may be associated with work beyond the sheltered rooms of the elite. By evening, however, the face has endured an entire day of smoke, dust, candle soot, wind, heat from fireplaces, and the close air of crowded rooms. The first task may simply be to wipe it clean. A linen cloth dampened with water or scented preparation passes gently across the forehead, cheeks, nose, and chin. Rosewater is again useful here, not only because of its scent but because it is widely believed to refresh and improve the skin. Distilled waters made from flowers and herbs occupy a comfortable place between household medicine and cosmetic care. A woman might also use preparations containing rosemary, lavender, or other plants familiar from physic gardens and manor kitchens. No one can quite agree on exactly how elaborate the nightly beauty routines of individual noblewomen were. Portraits reveal ideals, inventories reveal objects, and recipe books reveal possibilities, but none of these can show precisely what every woman did before bed. Some undoubtedly followed complicated regimens, others may have preferred very little. The surviving recipes, however, reveal an extraordinary willingness to experiment. Honey appears often because it softens and binds. Egg white may be used in preparations intended to tighten or smooth the skin. Vinegar occurs in cleansing mixtures. Ground almonds, milk, herbs, oils, animal fats, and floral waters all have their place in different household traditions. Some remedies are gentle, others are less reassuring. Preparations designed to whiten the complexion could include mineral ingredients that modern medicine recognizes as dangerous. Lead-based substances are the most notorious. A pale cosmetic often associated with later Tudor and Elizabethan beauty is sometimes described as ceruse, made with white lead and vinegar. How widely and regularly noblewomen use such preparations remains debated. The most extreme image of every Tudor lady covering her face nightly with thick poisonous paint is almost certainly too simple. Cosmetics varied by time, place, fashion, and individual taste. Yet lead compounds were known, used, and valued for their ability to create the fashionable pale surface that painters and courtiers admired. The danger lay in what users could not easily see. Long-term exposure to lead can damage the skin and body. If irritation appeared, a woman might respond by adding another ointment, another powder, or another whitening layer, perhaps worsening the very problem she hoped to hide. Tudor medicine does not understand this chemistry. A preparation can therefore be trusted because it is traditional, because an experienced woman recommends it, or because a respected recipe book preserves it. Household knowledge travels quietly. A nobleman may receive a remedy from her mother. A lady-in-waiting may learn another from a physician's wife. A servant may know which herb eases redness because women in her village have used it for years. The boundary between elite and folk knowledge is surprisingly porous. Inside a great manor, expensive imported ingredients can sit beside plants gathered from a garden wall. One lesser-known concern is freckles. Recipes intended to remove freckles, spots, scars, or discoloration appear repeatedly in early modern collections. Some use plant juices or distilled waters. Others call for stronger materials. The desire is not always vanity in a shallow sense. Visible skin is red socially, and blemishes may be associated, fairly or unfairly, with illness or poor constitution. A noblewoman therefore examines her face by uncertain light. Mirrors exist, but they are costly. A polished metal mirror may give a dim reflection. Better glass mirrors become increasingly available among wealthy households, though they remain valuable objects. Candlelight softens everything, turning skin golden near the flame and shadowed farther away. Perhaps this is not entirely unwelcome. The attendant holds the candle closer. A small blemish near the jaw is inspected. An ointment may be dabbed onto it. Another preparation is smoothed over dry skin around the hands or lips, where winter air has caused cracking. Cold is a constant enemy of comfort. Even wealthy women live in houses where drafts find their way beneath doors and through window frames. Fireplaces warm one side of a room while leaving another chilled. Skin dries quickly in such conditions, especially after repeated exposure to smoke. Greasy salves can help. Animal fats, beeswax, and oils are common bases for ointments because they create a protective layer. Herbs may be infused into them, sometimes for medicinal reasons and sometimes simply because they smell pleasant. Such jars need to be stored carefully. Rancidity is a real problem. There is no refrigerator waiting in a nearby room. A mixture containing fat, milk, egg, or plant material does not remain fresh indefinitely. Households therefore make some preparations in small quantities or keep them in cool places. The sense of smell becomes one of the simplest tests. If an ointment smells wrong, it probably is. The same practical judgment governs many areas of Tudor domestic life. Women managing large households must know how long food can be kept, whether linen has dried properly, which herbs are still useful, and when a remedy has spoiled. The noblewoman may not perform every task herself, but her household depends upon people who understand these signs. Her own face is part of that same domestic knowledge. There are treatments for redness, roughness, sun damage, scars, swelling, and tired eyes. Eyes themselves receive particular attention. A woman who has spent the evening in smoky rooms may experience watering or irritation. Herbal washes are sometimes recommended, though some historical eye remedies include substances that would make a modern physician deeply uncomfortable. Even now, historians continue to debate which prescriptions were actually applied and which remained merely copied curiosities. A recipe book can be ambitious. A tired woman at bedtime may be far more practical. Perhaps she chooses only rosewater and a little salve. Perhaps she trusts a mixture prepared by an older attendant. Perhaps she does nothing at all beyond washing. The important point is that beauty is not a separate hour devoted to vanity. It is woven into the rhythm of health, cleanliness, social expectation, and domestic medicine. Outside the chamber, footsteps pass briefly along the corridor, then they fade. The rain has stopped, leaving the manor surrounded by the soft dripping of eaves. Somewhere beyond the walls, moonlight touches wet branches and the dark roofs of the sleeping village. A late watchman moves beneath an archway with a lantern, while farther away a church bell sounds across the fields. Inside, the noblewoman looks once more toward the mirror. The face that met guests at supper is becoming private again. Powders are closed, cloths are folded. The smallest jars disappear into a chest, yet not every object near the bed is intended for beauty. As the attendants prepare the chamber for deeper night, their attention begins to turn toward fragrance, herbs, and the old belief that what surrounds a sleeper may influence the quality of her rest. Once the jars of cosmetic preparations are closed and the linen cloths folded away, the chamber acquires another layer of care, one that belongs neither entirely to medicine nor entirely to superstition. It begins with scent. The Tudor bedchamber is never truly neutral in smell. Even in a wealthy household, it gathers traces of smoke, warm fabric, wool blankets, damp stone, human bodies, wooden furniture, wax, old rushes, and the faint residue of meals carried through nearby passages. A chamber that has remained closed against winter weather can become stale surprisingly quickly. For this reason, noble households value aromatic plants. Lavender, rosemary, southernwood, mint, thyme, marjoram, and other herbs may be dried and kept in small bundles, sewn into cloth bags, scattered among stored linen, or placed near sleeping spaces. Some are cultivated in household gardens. Others arrive from market stalls or from estates belonging to the family. A servant may lift a small sachet from a chest and place it beside the bed. Another tucks dried lavender among folded sheets. The purpose seems simple enough, the plants smell pleasant. Yet Tudor thinking rarely stops there. Good smells are connected with good air, and good air is connected with health. The prevailing medical understanding of disease gives great importance to corrupted atmosphere, foul air, especially air carrying the odours of decay, stagnant water, waste, or sickness, is often feared as a cause of illness. People do not understand bacteria or viruses, but they do notice that disease frequently appears where conditions are crowded and unpleasant. Their explanation is different from ours. Their response, however, can be practical in its own way. Sweet-smelling substances become a kind of defense. A pomander is one of the more distinctive objects associated with this habit. It may take the form of a small perforated container, sometimes made from silver or another costly material, filled with aromatic compounds. Wealthier versions can be beautifully worked and worn from a girdle during the day. At night, it may remain nearby. Inside could be mixtures involving herbs, spices, resins, musk, ambergris, or other expensive ingredients, depending on the wealth of the owner and the recipe being followed. Not every noblewoman possesses the most elaborate kind. Simpler aromatic balls or packets can serve much the same purpose. No one can quite agree on how regularly such objects were actually placed beside beds, rather than simply worn or stored, because inventories tell us what people owned more readily than how they used each item every evening, Still, the belief behind them is clear. Fragrance is protective. The same principle explains why rosemary or juniper might be burned or scattered in rooms during periods of illness. Vinegar can be used for cleaning or combined with aromatic substances. Herbs may be carried close to the nose during outbreaks of disease. A Tudor noblewoman therefore goes to sleep surrounded by smells deliberately chosen to compete with the uncertain air beyond her curtains. Bed curtains themselves make the atmosphere more complicated. They are essential for warmth and privacy, but heavy fabric also traps body heat and scent. Thick hangings protect against drafts flowing through stone chambers, yet they can create an enclosed little world around the sleeper, freshening that space matters. An attendant may shake bedding earlier in the day and allow air to reach it. In dry weather, mattresses or blankets can be aired. In a large manor, laundresses and chamber servants spend remarkable amounts of time managing textiles. Mattresses are commonly stuffed with materials such as wool, feathers, straw, or combinations suited to wealth and circumstance. For a noblewoman, feather beds can be valuable possessions. They also offer excellent hiding places for fleas. Aromatic herbs are sometimes believed to discourage pests. Southernwood, pennyroyal, wormwood, lavender, and tansy all appear in traditions of insect control. Some may have genuine repellent qualities. Others are probably more comforting than effective. Even now, historians continue to debate how successful such practices were in the crowded textile environment of Tudor homes. The fleas, unfortunately, have left no household accounts of their opinion. By the standards of the age, however, anything that reduces biting is worth trying. Small bundles of herbs might be placed beneath or near bedding. Floors covered in rushes can also contain fragrant plants. Though these coverings must be renewed, old rushes left too long may trap dirt, crumbs, moisture, and insects rather than solving any problem. A well-managed chamber therefore requires constant attention. The noblewoman herself may know which scents she prefers. Lavender has a reputation for calmness and cleanliness. Rosemary carries associations with remembrance and health. Roses symbolize beauty and devotion, as well as providing useful scent. Some plants gather meanings beyond their physical properties. This is where household remedy begins to merge into protection of a more mysterious kind. A sprig of a particular herb may be kept because an older servant insists it guards against troublesome dreams. A charm might be tucked into a chest. A small object connected with a saint or pilgrimage may lie near the bed. The dividing line between religious devotion and folk protection can become uncertain. Church authorities often disapprove strongly of charms believed to possess magical power independent of God. Yet people continue to use objects containing prayers, sacred words, crosses, fragments of scripture, or blessed materials. To the person carrying them, these may not feel magical at all. They may simply feel reassuring. A pilgrim badge brought back from a shrine can serve as both memory and protection. Holy water may be kept in some households. A blessed candle can possess special significance. Certain plants associated with saints' days or church festivals may carry devotional meaning long after the formal ceremony has ended. The Reformation makes this world even more complicated. Across the Tudor century, official religion changes repeatedly and sometimes violently. Customs accepted in one reign may be condemned in another. Images disappear from churches. Shrines are dismantled. Old devotional habits survive privately, change form, or vanish depending on family loyalties and local practice. Those who recorded these years never fully agreed on how quickly ordinary belief changed. A noblewoman raised with traditional Catholic devotions might retain habits that younger relatives later consider old-fashioned or suspicious. Another may embrace reform enthusiastically. Yet both can still fear a restless night. Both can still find comfort in a familiar scent beside the pillow. Human habits often outlast official decrees. Near the hearth, a servant opens a small wooden box. Inside are dried herbs wrapped in linen. She chooses a little rosemary and perhaps lavender, then places the bundle near the bed where the warmth will release its fragrance gently. The room softens. Smoke from the fire remains, but it is less dominant now. Wax and herbs mingle in the warm air. Outside, the clouds have thinned. Moonlight lies pale across the wet courtyard stones. Water still drips occasionally from the edge of the roof. Somewhere in the stable, a horse shifts against its stall, and beyond the walls an owl moves through the dark trees bordering the winter fields. The village is quiet. Most windows there have gone black. Inside cottages, families sleep under wool blankets, perhaps with dried plants of their own hanging from rafters or stored among clothes. The ingredients are humbler, but the desire is much the same: warmth, better air, fewer pests, and a peaceful night. In the noble chamber, an attendant turns down part of the bedding. The pillows are arranged. The herb sachet rests close enough to release a faint scent whenever the fabric moves. Nothing here can guarantee sleep. Nothing here can guarantee protection, but Tudor nighttime ritual is built largely from such small acts of preparation: a cleaner cloth, a warmer blanket, a sweeter room, a familiar herb, a trusted object beside the bed. And once the chamber has been prepared against cold, stale air, insects, and uneasy dreams, another kind of protection begins to matter more deeply. The candles are still burning. The noblewoman is not yet ready to lie down. Before the curtains close, there are prayers to be said. Before the bed curtains are finally drawn, the chamber becomes quieter still. The practical work of the evening has nearly ended. Clothes have been folded. Hair has been arranged for sleep. Water has been carried away. Herbs rest near the bedding. The fire has settled into a low red glow, and the candle flame seems smaller now that fewer people are moving through the room. For a Tudor noblewoman, however, the night is not complete without attention to the soul. Prayer belongs naturally to the rhythm of evening. This is true across much of Europe, but Tudor England gives the habit a particular complexity because the century is marked by profound religious change. A woman born early in the reign of Henry VIII may grow up surrounded by images of saints, relics, rosaries, pilgrimages, and prayers for the dead. By the middle of the century, some of those same practices may be criticised, restricted, or condemned. Under different monarchs, religious expectations shift again. The result is a world in which bedtime devotion can become unexpectedly personal. No one can quite agree on how quickly private households changed their habits when official religion changed. Laws can be written in a single year, but customs learned in childhood do not always disappear so easily. A noblewoman may kneel beside the bed. Perhaps a small cushion has been placed on the floor for her knees. Perhaps she remains seated near the hearth because she's tired or unwell. In some chambers there may be a devotional image, a painted panel, a crucifix, or a prayer book resting on a nearby table, depending on the household and the religious climate of the moment. Earlier Tudor devotion often includes prayers directed through saints. The Virgin Mary holds particular importance. A woman worried about pregnancy may turn towards saints traditionally associated with childbirth. A traveller may pray to a saint connected with safe journeys. Someone fearing illness may remember a saint whose cult has long been associated with healing. The exact saint depends on region, family tradition, and personal experience. Pilgrimage has helped spread these devotions. A noble family may possess badges or tokens brought back from shrines. Small metal pilgrim badges are often sewn onto clothing or kept as souvenirs. Some are associated with places such as Canterbury, Walsingham, or other important religious centres. To modern eyes, such objects may appear simple. To a Tudor believer, they can carry memory, hope, and protection. A badge may recall a difficult journey along muddy roads, nights spent at inns, crowded churchyards, monastery bells, and the moment of finally reaching a sacred shrine. By the time of the Reformation, many of these customs become controversial. Shrines are dismantled, relics are removed, monasteries are dissolved. Pilgrimage is increasingly attacked as superstition or misuse of religion, yet memory survives longer than buildings. Some noblewomen have relatives who once endowed monasteries. Others grew up visiting abbeys that later stand empty or are transformed into private houses. A devotional habit learned from a mother or grandmother may remain long after official sermons have turned against it. The rosary is one example. In traditional Catholic practice, beads help guide repeated prayers and meditation. A noblewoman may have owned a rosary made from wood, coral, amber, jet, precious metal, or other materials according to wealth. After religious reform, the rosary can become suspect in Protestant households. Some women abandon it. Others may retain old beads privately. Some chroniclers claim that families concealed forbidden devotional objects during periods of religious tension. Though such accounts are difficult to generalize, fear, loyalty, and habit differ from house to house. A prayer book is another intimate possession. Before printed books become more widely available, illuminated books of hours are especially treasured among the wealthy. These books contain prayers arranged around the hours of the day, often accompanied by richly decorated images. By the Tudor period, printed devotional works become increasingly important. English-language prayer books appear beside older Latin traditions. The religious identity of the household may determine which texts are acceptable. A noblewoman able to read may pray directly from a book. Another may know her prayers by memory. An attendant might participate quietly nearby. The sound is low enough that it never travels far beyond the chamber. Night prayer often includes examination of the day. A person might ask forgiveness for anger, impatience, envy, dishonesty, or neglected duties. The concern is not merely whether one has behaved well socially. Death is close enough in Tudor life that spiritual preparation can feel immediate. People die from infections that begin with minor wounds. Women die in childbirth. Children die young. Seasonal illness sweeps through households. Travel can end badly on a river crossing or winter road. No noble title provides complete protection from mortality. This gives bedtime prayer a seriousness that is easy to underestimate. Going to sleep resembles a small act of surrender. The sleeper closes her eyes without certainty that morning will come. Some devotional texts include prayers specifically intended for use before sleep, asking for protection through the night. The language may invoke angels, divine guardianship, forgiveness, and safe waking. There is also concern about dreams. Tudor people do not necessarily regard every dream as meaningful, but some dreams are interpreted as warnings, temptations, or signs. Religious writers caution against placing too much faith in them, especially when dream interpretation slips toward divination. Even now, historians continue to debate how seriously elite women treated dream lore in private life. They had access to learned skepticism. They also lived among traditions far older than the Reformation. A disturbing dream might therefore be mentioned to a trusted attendant in the morning, even by someone who officially dismisses superstition. The Church teaches that spiritual danger can be most threatening when a person is vulnerable. Night is naturally associated with temptation, uncertainty, and unseen forces. This does not mean that every Tudor noblewoman lies awake fearing demons in every shadow. Most evenings are probably far more ordinary. Fatigue is often stronger than imagination. Still, ritual offers reassurance. A prayer said in the same order each night creates structure. A familiar verse marks the end of activity. A blessing closes the day. Some women may make the sign of the cross before sleep, though attitudes toward the gesture vary as Protestant reform progresses. What feels reverent to one generation can seem suspiciously traditional to another. That tension sometimes enters families themselves. A household might outwardly conform to the religion demanded by the crown while privately preserving older practices. Another might embrace reform thoroughly and remove every object associated with the previous faith. Those who recorded the story never fully agreed on how much private resistance survived behind noble doors. The answer is probably different in every chamber. Tonight, however, there is no theological argument, only candlelight. The noblewoman lowers her head. Perhaps her hands are folded. Perhaps a small book rests open before her. Beyond the oak door, the household is nearly asleep. The kitchens have quieted. The courtyard is empty except for the watch. Farther away, moonlight lies across winter fields, and the dark outline of a stone church rises above the village roofs. Then the bell sounds. Its slow note travels through the night and reaches the manor walls softened by distance. The noblewoman finishes her prayer. An attendant closes the book. The candle beside it is moved farther from the bed for safety. For a moment, the room seems suspended between devotion and sleep. Yet formal prayer does not remove every uncertainty of the night. Beside scripture and accepted ritual survive quieter belief signs, charms, dreams, omens, and warnings that people may hesitate to mention in daylight. As the bed curtains begin to close, those older fears wait patiently in the darkness. When formal prayers are finished and the prayer book has been closed, the Tudor night does not become entirely rational. The noblewoman may trust the church, the physician, the household steward, and the routines she has followed since childhood. Yet darkness has always created space for uncertainty. Even in rooms guarded by thick walls, heavy doors, servants, and family reputation, people still wonder about dreams, strange noises, sudden illness, and the possibility that unseen forces might press closer after sunset. The Tudor world is full of signs. Some are religious, some belong to medicine. Some come from folklore so old that no one remembers where it began. A noblewoman may publicly dismiss a superstition and still avoid testing it. That contradiction is not unusual. People can be skeptical and cautious at the same time. No one can quite agree on how seriously elite women believed the many nighttime warnings recorded in later collections of folklore. Such traditions often survived because someone eventually wrote them down, but that does not mean every belief was accepted in every household. Still, enough references remain to suggest that dreams and omens occupied a real place in early modern imagination. Dreams are especially troublesome. A vivid dream might be interpreted as nothing more than the result of too much food, a feverish body, or an unsettled mind. Tudor medicine, drawing heavily on older theories of the humours, often explains disturbing dreams through digestion and bodily imbalance. Rich evening meals, strong wine, certain meats, or excessive heat could all be blamed for restless sleep. This is one reason moderation before bed can be considered medically wise. Yet another interpretation exists beside it. A dream may be a warning. It may reveal anxiety that the waking mind has ignored. It may even be treated as a sign of something approaching. Religious authorities repeatedly caution against turning dreams into prophecy, particularly when interpretation resembles fortune-telling. But warnings are necessary only when people are tempted to do the forbidden thing. In some households, dream books circulate. These texts claim that particular images carry meaning. Water might suggest one thing, fire another. Animals, falling teeth, blood, storms, weddings, or dead relatives may all be assigned symbolic interpretations. The systems rarely agree with one another. Even now, historians continue to debate whether educated Tudor women treated these books as serious guidance, entertainment, or something in between. Perhaps the answer changes according to the dream. A pleasant dream can be dismissed easily. A terrifying one is harder to forget. A noblewoman waking before dawn after dreaming of a funeral might not immediately summon a priest or physician, but she may remember it at breakfast. She may mention it quietly to an attendant. If bad news arrives later that day, the dream can suddenly appear much more important than it seemed at first. Human memory is very good at finding patterns after the event. Tudor people are no different. Night noises also encourage interpretation. A great house is never completely silent. Timber contracts. Stone carries distant footsteps. Wind moves around chimneys. Rain taps against shutters. Rats disturb hidden spaces. A dog may bark in the courtyard. Birds can strike roofs or cry from nearby trees. Most sounds have ordinary causes, but an unexpected noise in darkness is easier to fear than the same noise at noon. Owls carry particular associations in European folklore, often linked with death, wilderness, or misfortune. Dogs howling without visible reason can be interpreted as warnings. Sudden changes in candle flames may attract attention. A candle that gutters because of a draught is simply responding to moving air. But if no draught can be felt, the mind begins working. The same is true of shadows. Candlelight is unstable. It stretches furniture across walls, makes bed curtains move when they are barely stirring, and turns carved wooden objects into unfamiliar shapes. A practical servant knows this. She adjusts the candle. The strange figure becomes a chest again. Still, some protections are kept close. A charm may consist of written words folded into a small packet. A cross might be worn or kept near the bed. A blessed object may be placed somewhere in the chamber. Earlier in the Tudor period, relics and devotional tokens are widely accepted within Catholic practice. Later, many reformers condemn such objects when they appear to be treated as possessing independent magical power. But official condemnation does not erase private comfort. Some people carry sacred words because they believe those words protect them. Others use objects whose origins are much less clearly Christian. Bits of metal, stones, herbs, knots, and fragments of writing can all appear in protective traditions. Coral is especially interesting. Among wealthy families, coral may be worn as jewellery and is sometimes credited with protective qualities. It has long associations with safeguarding children, warding off danger, or revealing illness by changing appearance. Whether every owner believes these stories is impossible to know, a beautiful object can be fashionable and protective at once. Another curious belief concerns iron. Iron has deep associations with protection in European folklore. Objects made from iron may be thought to resist harmful supernatural forces. This does not mean Tudor noblewomen routinely sleep with horseshoes beneath their pillows, but the broader idea that particular materials carry protective qualities is well established. Plants also belong to this nighttime world. St. John's wort, for example, acquires a reputation in European tradition as a protective herb. Other plants may be associated with particular saints, feast days, or folk remedies against frightening dreams. A small bundle tied with thread can therefore mean several things at once. It might smell pleasant, it might repel insects, it might have medicinal value, it might also make the sleeper feel safer. These layers are difficult to separate because Tudor people themselves do not always separate them. Medicine, faith, inherited custom, and superstition overlap constantly. The moon adds another dimension. Its phases are believed by many to influence health, agriculture, bloodletting, and even the timing of certain treatments. Astrological thinking remains respectable enough in educated circles that physicians may consider celestial conditions when evaluating illness. The boundary between accepted learning and superstition is not where a modern observer might place it. A physician consulting the stars can be considered learned. A village woman reading omens from household accidents may be dismissed as foolish. Yet both are trying to understand uncertainty through patterns. For noblewomen, this matters particularly during pregnancy or illness, when nighttime fears can become more intense. A strange pain after dark carries more weight when medical help is distant. A disturbing dream during pregnancy may be remembered anxiously. A sudden cry from the courtyard can seem like an omen when the household is already worried about sickness. Some chroniclers claim that women were especially vulnerable to superstition, but such claims often reveal more about male writers than about women themselves. Men consulted astrologers, kings worried about prophecy, courtiers carried charms. Sailors watched omens. Fear of uncertainty belongs to everyone. The noblewoman in her chamber is therefore part of a much larger culture of nighttime interpretation. She does not need to believe every tale. She only needs to live in a world where those tales are available. The last attendants begin preparing to leave. One checks the fire. Another makes certain that no candle stands too close to hanging fabric. A third may remain in an adjoining room or nearby sleeping space. Outside, the wind has risen again. It moves through the bare trees and crosses the roofs of the sleeping manor. Somewhere beyond the courtyard, a watchman's lantern passes briefly beneath an arch, then disappears. The noblewoman hears the distant scrape of a branch against stone. For a moment, the sound is difficult to identify. Then it comes again, only a branch, only the wind. The room settles. The herbs near the pillow release their faint scent. The protective objects, whether devotional, medicinal, or simply familiar, remain where they have been placed, and as uncertainty withdraws once more into the shadows, attention turns toward the chamber itself, the bedstead, the curtains, the warming pan, the chests, the stools, the fire, and the many ordinary objects that will surround the noblewoman until morning. The Tudor noblewoman's bedchamber is not merely a place where sleep happens. It is a carefully arranged world of fabric, wood, fire, metal, storage, and status. During the day it may receive trusted visitors, attendants, relatives, and household officers. At night, however, its purpose narrows. The room becomes warmer, quieter, and more intimate, while the objects within it reveal how much preparation is required simply to rest comfortably in a large early modern house. The bed dominates the space. A wealthy noblewoman may sleep in a substantial carved wooden bedstead, sometimes made from oak and built strongly enough to last for generations. Beds of exceptional quality appear in wills and inventories because they are valuable possessions, not disposable furniture. The frame may be decorated with carved posts, panels, or ornamental details, but the most important parts of the bed are often made from cloth. Heavy hangings surround it. Curtains can be drawn around the sleeper to reduce drafts and create a pocket of warmer air. A tester or canopy above the bed may support additional fabric, helping to enclose the space. These textiles can be expensive, especially when made from fine wool, silk, damask, velvet, or embroidered material. No one can quite agree on how elaborate the average noblewoman's nightly bed hangings were because inventories record exceptional possessions more often than ordinary use. Some chambers are richly furnished, others are comfortable but surprisingly restrained. Even in a grand household, wealth is distributed unevenly. The principal chamber receives the finest bed. Guest rooms may have simpler arrangements. Servants sleep with considerably less. The mattress itself can consist of several layers. A feather bed offers softness and warmth to those who can afford one. Beneath or alongside it may be mattresses stuffed with wool, flock, or other materials. Then come sheets. Good linen sheets are among the quiet luxuries of elite life. Producing them requires flax to be grown, processed, spun, woven, bleached, sewn, washed, and maintained. A smooth sheet may look simple, but it represents an enormous chain of labour. Blankets of wool provide warmth above. Coverlets add another layer. In winter, fur can sometimes appear among the bedding or clothing used for sleep, particularly in very wealthy households. The exact combination changes according to season and household custom. Cold remains persistent. Even with curtains drawn, the bed may feel icy when first entered. This is where the warming pan becomes useful. An attendant takes a metal pan with a long handle and fills it with hot embers or heated material from the hearth. The pan is then passed carefully between the sheets before the noblewoman gets into bed. The action must be controlled. A careless servant could scorch expensive linen. Worse, a spark might escape. Fire is one of the greatest dangers in a chamber filled with wood, curtains, mattresses, rushes, clothing, and candles. The warming pan is therefore both comforting and slightly hazardous. Some surviving examples are beautifully pierced or decorated, suggesting that even practical objects could reflect status. The bed is warmed. Then the pan is removed. Nearby stands a stool or chair. Furniture in Tudor chambers is generally less abundant than in later domestic interiors. A few heavy pieces may serve many purposes. A carved chest stores clothing or linen. A small table supports candles, books, drinking vessels, or grooming objects. A joined stool provides a seat that can be moved easily. Chests are especially important. They lock, they travel, they protect valuable possessions. A nobleman moving between estates may have clothing and household goods transported in substantial quantities. The Tudor elite are not always permanently settled in one residence. Court service, estate management, family visits, political obligations, and seasonal movement can keep households surprisingly mobile. A chest therefore belongs both to the room and to the road. Inside it may lie linen, clothing, documents, small devotional objects, or personal belongings. The outside can become scratched by years of use. Iron fittings darken, wood absorbs smoke. Such furniture survives long enough to outlive its first owner. The chamber walls may also carry textiles. Tapestries or painted cloths can soften the appearance of bare surfaces and provide some insulation. A wall hanging between the occupant and cold stone makes practical sense, though its decorative imagery also proclaims wealth and taste. Biblical scenes, classical stories, hunting imagery, heraldic symbols, or floral patterns may surround the sleeper. By candlelight, their figures appear almost alive. Not magically alive, of course, simply uncertain. The moving flame changes every outline. One face disappears into shadow while another becomes briefly visible. For someone waking suddenly in the night, the effect can be unsettling. Yet this is an ordinary part of sleeping in a room illuminated only by fire. The fireplace itself is central to comfort. A servant rakes the embers before leaving, and depending on household rules, enough heat may be allowed to survive into the early hours, though no one can guarantee it will last until dawn. Chimneys are far more developed in Tudor elite houses than they had been in earlier centuries, allowing private chambers to enjoy fireplaces rather than relying entirely on central halls. Even so, smoke is never entirely absent. Downdrafts occur, soot accumulates. A chimney may draw poorly in certain weather. The smell of wood smoke becomes part of the fabric of the house. Another object stands in a discreet part of the room, the chamber pot. Its presence is entirely practical. Few people want to navigate dark passages and stairways to reach a privy in the middle of a cold night. A ceramic, metal, or pewter vessel solves the problem, and servants empty and clean it later. A more elaborate close stool may exist in high-status households. This resembles a chair fitted over a removable container. To modern sensibilities, it seems deeply private. In Tudor life, attendants may be involved. Privacy has different boundaries here. A trusted servant can assist with matters that later centuries gradually separate from ordinary domestic service. The chamber also contains wash basins, ewers, boxes, baskets, candle holders, perhaps a small clock in extremely wealthy circumstances, and objects connected with personal devotion. Candles must stand in stable holders. Bed curtains and open flame are a dangerous combination. Household instructions sometimes emphasize extinguishing lights carefully, and the reason is obvious. Fire can consume a timbered house rapidly once cloth and dry wood catch. A candle is therefore never merely light. It is something to supervise. An attendant may carry away unnecessary candles and leave only what is required. The noblewoman does not need a brightly illuminated room once she's in bed. A small flame near the hearth may be enough for a final prayer or a few quiet words. Beyond the bedchamber door, other people remain close. A servant may sleep in an adjoining space. A lady in waiting may occupy another bed nearby. In great houses, chambers often connect in sequences, so reaching one room can require passing through another. Private space is layered rather than absolute. Even now, historians continue to debate how much solitude elite women truly possessed. Architectural plans, inventories, and household regulations suggest that noblewomen could command restricted spaces, yet trusted servants were almost constantly present. The chamber is private compared with the hall. It is not necessarily lonely. Outside, mist spreads across the fields once more. The watchfire in the courtyard burns low. A bell from the distant church marks another portion of the night, its sound travelling over wet roofs and dark hedges before reaching the manor. Inside, the noblewoman sits at the edge of the warmed bed. The oak frame does not move. The curtains wait to be drawn. The chamber pot stands discreetly in shadow. The fire glows behind its iron grate. Every object has been placed for a purpose. And when the noblewoman finally lies down, one last question remains around her. Who else is allowed to remain this close? The answer very often is more people than a modern listener might expect. A Tudor noblewoman's bedchamber belongs to her by rank, but rank does not guarantee solitude. The room is private in relation to the hall, the courtyard, and the wider household, yet it remains part of a living structure of service, companionship, hierarchy, and watchfulness. The night closes around the manor, but it does not leave every woman alone behind a locked door. Who sleeps nearby depends greatly on status, age, circumstance, and the architecture of the house. A married noblewoman of high rank may have attendants close at hand, especially if she's pregnant, unwell, or responsible for many household matters that can still demand attention after dark. A young, unmarried gentlewoman may sleep in a room shared with sisters, female relatives, or other young women of similar standing. A widow may enjoy somewhat greater control over her private apartments, though even she is unlikely to dismiss every servant once the candles are lowered. Servants sleep close because service begins again early. A trusted chamberwoman may occupy a pallet, truckle bed, or smaller bed in the same chamber or in an adjoining room. A lady in waiting may remain nearby, ready to assist if her mistress wakes cold, ill, anxious, or in need of some small comfort. In especially large houses, rooms open into one another in a sequence, so that passing into a more private chamber requires moving through outer ones. The result is not privacy in the modern sense, but a layered arrangement of access. Some people may come only so far, others are permitted farther. That difference matters enormously. One lesser-known feature of elite domestic life is that the bed itself can function almost like a boundary of privilege. Being received in a bedchamber may be an honour. Being invited to approach the bed closely may signal particular favour, trust, or intimacy. Court culture later becomes especially elaborate in such matters, but even outside court the principle already exists. Space near the body of a great lady is controlled space, yet closeness can also be entirely practical. Beds are expensive, rooms are cold, travel disrupts ordinary sleeping arrangements. All of this helps explain why bed sharing is more common than many modern people assume. Sharing a bed does not necessarily imply romance, secrecy, or scandal. It can simply mean convenience, economy, safety, or companionship. Female relatives may sleep together while travelling. Ladies serving a mistress may share a bed among themselves. Guests in crowded households may be paired according to rank and circumstance. No one can quite agree on how often noblewomen of the highest rank literally shared their main bed with attendants in ordinary circumstances, because practices vary widely and evidence is uneven. But the broader culture of shared sleeping is unmistakable. Even among the wealthy, sleeping alone every night in a vast room would not always be the default. There are practical reasons to prefer company. A chamber can be frightening when illness strikes in the dark. A pregnant woman may need help quickly. A sudden noise in the corridor is easier to bear when another person hears it too. Even something as simple as a dying fire becomes less troublesome when someone nearby can stir it or fetch assistance. And then there is conversation. Not every night ends in immediate silence. Once the last heavy tasks are complete and the formal stiffness of the day has fallen away, softer talk may linger for a while among women who know one another well. A mistress may speak quietly with a favourite attendant while ribbons are untied or blankets arranged. A young woman may whisper with a sister or cousin across the room. Such exchanges rarely find their way into chronicles, yet they may be among the most human parts of noble life. A concern about a child, a memory from court, a report from the village, a small complaint about damp weather or a stubborn seamstress. Nothing grand, nothing theatrical, only the sort of thoughts that seem to arrive more easily when the candles are low and the house is almost asleep. At times, however, the bedchamber can also become a place of watchfulness. A noblewoman does not entirely stop being a political or social being when she retires. If she belongs to a powerful family, her health, fertility, alliances, and household management all matter beyond the walls of her room. Pregnancy, especially, turns privacy into something more fragile. Attendants may be instructed to remain close. Midwives or older female companions can become important presences long before labour begins. Some chroniclers claimed that elite women were constantly observed, and while that may be exaggerated, there is truth in the idea that noble life leaves little room for complete invisibility. Even sleep happens within a structure of duty. Household servants also have their own sleeping worlds. Below stairs or in lesser chambers, men and women arrange themselves according to rank, task, and available space. Apprentices, pages, maids, and labourers often sleep with far less comfort than their employers. Straw pallets, shared bedsteads, rough blankets, and crowded quarters are common. The noblewoman lying beneath layered bedding and enclosed by curtains is only one sleeper among many in the darkened house. Still, her chamber remains a focal point. If she calls, someone must hear. If she falls ill, someone must respond. If a messenger arrives at dawn with urgent news, the route to her door is already understood. There are also anxieties about reputation. A noblewoman's honour is guarded not only by walls and locks, but by careful management of who may be present and when. A man entering the bedchamber at the wrong hour could provoke gossip, even if his purpose were innocent. For that reason, female attendants play an important role as both helpers and witnesses. Their presence can protect propriety as much as comfort. This reveals an interesting paradox. The chamber is crowded partly because it is intimate. The more important the woman, the more carefully intimacy must be supervised. Even now, historians continue to debate how these arrangements felt to the women themselves. Some may have treasured moments alone whenever they could find them. Others, raised from childhood in a shared domestic environment, may not have desired much solitude at all. Expectations are shaped by the world a person knows, and the Tudor world is communal by instinct. Meals are shared, work is shared, travel is shared, prayer is often shared, sleep, too, exists on a spectrum between companionship and privacy. A maid draws the bed curtains part way, then pauses in case her mistress wants them adjusted differently. Another checks that the chamber pot is within easy reach. A third gathers the final garments left over the chair. If one attendant will remain in the room, she settles herself quietly with the practiced economy of someone who's done so many times before. If the attendants sleep just beyond the door, that door is left in the manner the household expects, perhaps not fully latched, perhaps opened only enough for a call to be heard. Outside, the wind moves more softly now, clouds have thinned, and moonlight stretches across the inner court, touching the edge of a well, a rain barrel, and the pale stones beneath an archway. Somewhere far beyond the manor, a cart road lies empty between hedges, and the village church stands dark except for the faint silvering of its tower. The bells are silent for the moment, The fields sleep under a thin mist. Inside, the noblewoman finally lies back against her pillows. The curtains narrow the world around her. Others remain nearby, though unseen now, guardians of comfort, rank, reputation, and habit. And even with such company, the old enemy of every stone house is still waiting patiently beyond the fabric and wood. The deepest cold has not yet gone. The deepest cold of a Tudor night rarely arrives at sunset. It gathers slowly. For the first few hours after supper, the household still carries warmth from cooking fires, crowded rooms, candles, human movement, and servants passing along corridors with hot water or fresh fuel. But as midnight approaches, activity decreases. Doors remain closed, fires burn lower. The stone, timber, plaster, and glass of the manor begin surrendering whatever heat they gathered during the day. By the middle of a winter night, even a noblewoman's chamber can feel remarkably cold. Her wealth changes the degree of discomfort, but it cannot abolish the season. A great house might have fireplaces in its principal rooms, thick bed curtains, costly wool blankets, and servants responsible for tending fires. Yet Tudor heating is local rather than universal. The hearth warms the space closest to it. Corners remain chilly. Corridors can be bitter. Floors radiate cold upward through shoes and stockings, and draughts find their way around doors, shutters, window frames, and chimneys. No one can quite agree on the average temperature inside Tudor manor houses during winter, because measurements of the kind modern historians would like simply do not exist. Architecture also varies enormously. A relatively new brick residence with smaller chambers may retain heat differently from an old stone castle, built for defence in another age. But surviving buildings make one fact easy to understand. Stone remembers winter. A noblewoman lying behind closed bed curtains therefore occupies a little climate of her own. The heavy fabric surrounding the bed does more than create privacy. It traps the warmth of the sleeper's body and limits the movement of cold air. When several layers of curtains are used, the difference can be meaningful. Thick woolen hangings are especially useful, and wealthy households may possess elaborate sets listed carefully among valuable furnishings. The curtains are not drawn too tightly at first. Air must still circulate. A servant may adjust them according to the mistress's preference, leaving an opening until she's properly settled beneath the blankets. The bedding has already been warmed. Earlier, a long-handled warming pan may have been passed beneath the sheets. The metal pan, filled with hot embers, transfers heat into the linen before being removed. It is a simple device, but on a freezing night it can transform the first few minutes in bed. There is risk in it. Embers and fine linen are uneasy companions. A careless servant might scorch sheets or leave behind a spark, and stories of household fires make clear why open flame is treated with respect. Whether warming pans caused as many accidents as later storytellers suggested is uncertain, but the possibility is obvious enough. Some households may prefer warmed bricks or stones wrapped in cloth. These can be placed near the feet, offering slow heat without carrying loose embers directly into the bedding. Again, exact practices vary, and historians continue to debate how widespread each method was. What matters most is that cold requires preparation. The noblewoman wears linen to bed, but she may add more according to the weather. A nightgown in this period can mean something different from the modern garment, sometimes referring to a loose robe worn indoors rather than exclusively to sleep in. Such garments may be lined or trimmed for warmth. Fur remains one of the most effective protections available. Sable, marten, squirrel, rabbit, lamb, and other furs appear in garments according to wealth and status. Some are prized primarily for prestige, while others are valued because they simply work. A fur-lined robe drawn around the shoulders while sitting near the fire can make the final hour before bed much more tolerable. Once beneath the bedding, wool becomes essential. Wool blankets retain warmth even in damp conditions. One reason wool is so deeply woven into English life and economy, the countryside beyond the manor may itself be shaped by sheep, grazing rights, cloth production, markets, and the wealth generated by wool. In the bedchamber, all of that commerce becomes something very simple, a heavy blanket across cold feet. The sleeper may also wear a linen cap, as earlier preparations have already suggested. The head loses warmth quickly when exposed to cold air, and Tudor medical thinking gives additional reasons for keeping it covered. Drafts are feared, especially around the head and neck, A sudden chill can be blamed for illness. Cold air entering the body seems dangerous. The exact medical explanation differs from modern understanding, but the discomfort itself is real enough. Servants therefore check shutters before retiring. Wooden shutters are closed securely. Curtains may hang over windows. In some houses, fabric screens or wall hangings reduce the sensation of cold surfaces. Glass is a sign of wealth, but Tudor window glass does not provide modern insulation. Small panes joined with lead allow light into the room during the day, yet the frames can admit drafts. In lesser rooms, windows may be less sophisticated still. Even the finest chamber cannot entirely separate itself from the weather outside. Wind reveals every weakness. On stormy nights it pushes smoke back down chimneys. It whistles through imperfect joints. It rattles shutters and makes old timber creak. Rain is easier to tolerate. Snow brings a different silence. When winter fields surrounding the manor are covered in snow, nighttime sound seems to shrink. Roads become pale and difficult. Footsteps soften. Village roofs gather white along their slopes. A distant abbey or stone church may appear almost colourless beneath the moon. Inside, the noblewoman feels that silence only indirectly. The fire cracks. A log collapses into embers. Perhaps the attendant sleeping nearby stirs and pulls her own blanket closer. Fuel itself is a nightly concern. A great household consumes tremendous quantities of wood, charcoal, or coal depending on region and circumstance. Someone must cut it, transport it, stack it, keep it dry, and carry it into the house. The noblewoman may rarely see that labour directly, but every warm room depends upon it. In wooded estates, servants and tenants manage coppices where trees are cut in cycles so that new growth can provide future fuel. Deadwood is collected where rights permit. Charcoal burners work in forests. Carts struggle along muddy roads carrying loads that seem ordinary until winter makes them essential. A fire represents an entire landscape of labour. This becomes especially visible during severe winters. If roads freeze or storms delay deliveries, even wealthy households must think carefully about stores. Servants may close unused rooms. People gather more frequently around the most reliable hearths. Extra hangings are brought out. Clothing is layered. There are beliefs, too, about how to sleep safely in cold weather. Some recommend keeping the stomach moderately warm. Others warn against sleeping immediately after heavy food. Household remedies may include warm spiced drinks or medicinal preparations intended to prevent chill. Wine or ale can be warmed and flavoured, though moderation is generally advised when the purpose is sleep rather than celebration. Hot posset is one familiar preparation in the broader period. Combining hot milk with ale or wine and sometimes spices, recipes vary considerably. Whether a particular noblewoman takes such a drink every winter night is impossible to know. Perhaps she prefers nothing. Perhaps she accepts a small cup because her attendant insists that it helps against the cold. There is something reassuring about holding a warm vessel between chilled hands. Outside the chamber, the manor is now nearly motionless. A watchman crosses the courtyard, his breath pale in the freezing air. His boots strike hard ground where yesterday there was mud. Somewhere beyond the walls, bare branches rub together above a road that no traveller is likely to choose until daylight. The church bell sounds through the cold. Its note seems sharper in winter. Within the bed curtains, the noblewoman shifts deeper beneath the blankets. For a little while, warmth holds. But winter is not the only thing capable of disturbing a Tudor night. Bodies themselves are uncertain. A woman may lie down healthy and wake feverish. She may be carrying a child. She may suffer pain that has no clear explanation. And when illness enters the chamber after midnight, all the herbs, servants, prayers, and household knowledge surrounding the bed suddenly take on a far more serious purpose. When illness enters a Tudor bedchamber after midnight, the calm order of the evening can change without warning. A noblewoman who had been warm beneath wool blankets may wake with a fever, a headache, a sudden pain in the abdomen, or a sense of weakness that seems difficult to explain. Perhaps she's been unwell for days and the night simply makes the discomfort feel stronger. Perhaps she's pregnant, and every unfamiliar ache carries a different weight of concern. Perhaps menstruation has left her tired and chilled. Perhaps she's eaten too richly at supper, and now blames the heaviness in her stomach on something more ominous. Whatever the cause, the first response is rarely solitary. An attendant sleeping nearby hears movement behind the curtains. A candle is lit. The room, which only moments earlier had been dark and quiet, slowly returns to life. The servant approaches the bed and asks what is wrong. Water may be fetched, the fire may be stirred, another blanket is added if the woman feels cold, or the curtains are opened slightly if she complains of heat. Tudor medicine interprets these symptoms through a world of humours: bodily balance, digestion, temperature, and inherited medical authority. No one can quite agree on how closely every noble household followed formal medical theory in ordinary nighttime emergencies. Learned physicians may speak about blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile, while an experienced chamber woman may simply know that a particular drink helped her mistress the last time she suffered the same pain. Both forms of knowledge can exist side by side. A household may possess a chest of remedies. Within it are small jars, packets, bottles, dried herbs, powders, oils, and perhaps written recipes copied over many years. Some belong to a professional physician's advice. Others come from mothers, sisters, servants, neighbours, apothecaries, or local healers. The noblewoman herself may understand a surprising amount about these preparations. Elite women often play important roles in household medicine. Managing remedies is part of domestic responsibility, especially on estates where professional medical help cannot arrive quickly. A physician may live several miles away. At midnight, several miles can feel much farther. Roads are dark, gates are closed, horses must be saddled, and a messenger must travel through mud, frost, rain, or mist. Even if the family can afford excellent medical advice, immediate help may still come from the women already inside the chamber. Herbs are often the first resource. Mint may be used for digestive discomfort. Chamomile has associations with soothing preparations. Fennel, sage, rosemary, rue, and other familiar plants appear in household remedies for a wide range of complaints. Some treatments are mild enough, others are far stronger. Purgatives and emetics are common because removing harmful material from the body seems medically logical. Bleeding may also be recommended for certain conditions, depending on the patient, the suspected imbalance, and sometimes even the season or position of the stars. Even now, historians continue to debate how often noblewomen actually underwent bloodletting for ordinary complaints rather than more serious illness. Physicians certainly prescribed it. Patients did not necessarily welcome it. A tired woman with a headache may prefer a warmed drink and darkness to the arrival of someone carrying a lancet. There are also remedies for sleeplessness, preparations involving lettuce, poppy, certain syrups, herbs, or distilled waters may be recommended to calm the body. Some are relatively gentle, others can be dangerous when dosages are uncertain. The Tudor household has no standardized medicine cabinet. Strength varies according to preparation, experience matters enormously. Pregnancy makes every decision more delicate. For a noblewoman, childbirth is not only a personal event, it can affect inheritance, property, alliances, and the future of a family. A pregnancy is therefore watched closely, sometimes with hope intense enough to become anxiety. Nighttime discomfort can bring attendants quickly to the bedside. An older married woman may be trusted because she has witnessed several births. A midwife might be summoned if the symptoms suggest labour or danger. Female relatives can gather in the chamber when circumstances become serious. The world around childbirth is heavily female. Male physicians may sometimes become involved, particularly in difficult cases or among wealthy families, but much routine knowledge remains in the hands of midwives and experienced women. Pregnancy also attracts remedies, cautions, prayers, and beliefs. Certain foods may be recommended, others may be avoided. Strong smells, emotional shocks, physical strain, and even particular sights can be blamed for harming the unborn child according to older theories. Some women carry protective objects or religious tokens. Before the Reformation, appeals to saints associated with childbirth may provide comfort. Later in the Tudor century, such practices can become controversial, but fear does not always change as quickly as doctrine. Those who recorded these customs never fully agreed on how widely they survived behind private doors. A charm might therefore be hidden rather than displayed. A prayer might be spoken from memory rather than from a forbidden book. A woman may trust both the midwife's hands and a verse she learned as a girl. Menstruation is another part of female life that survives only unevenly in the records. Cloths or other absorbent materials may be used, washed, and reused. Customs differ, and the evidence is fragmentary enough that historians must be cautious. What is certain is that monthly bleeding was understood through the same medical framework of humours and bodily balance. Some physicians considered menstruation necessary for female health. Irregular bleeding might therefore be treated as evidence of imbalance. Household remedies intended to encourage or regulate it appear in medical collections, often using herbs whose effects could be powerful and sometimes unsafe, for a noblewoman lying awake with cramps or weakness. However, the most immediate comforts may be simpler: warmth, rest, a cloth, a drink, someone trustworthy nearby. Fever is more frightening. Without antibiotics, a minor infection can become dangerous. A wound from a needle, a cut on the hand, a dental problem, or an illness beginning with nothing more dramatic than a sore throat can worsen quickly. Tudor people understand that fevers matter, even if they misunderstand the cause. The patient's urine may be inspected, pulse can be examined, the colour of the skin is noticed, sweating, chills, appetite, sleep, and bowel movements all become clues. An attendant may save a urine sample for a physician, because examining urine is a familiar part of medical diagnosis. To modern eyes, some conclusions drawn from it seem fanciful, yet observation itself is serious. The household watches carefully because there are few reliable ways to know what is happening inside the body. The noblewoman may be given watered wine, ale, broth, or another drink depending on advice and condition. Heavy food is avoided if digestion is thought weak. A posset or herbal infusion may be prepared. Someone brings another candle, someone else checks whether the messenger has left for the physician, and then comes waiting. Waiting is one of the quietest realities of pre-modern medicine. Nothing arrives instantly. The patient lies beneath blankets while the household listens to her breathing and hopes the fever passes. Outside, a thin mist crosses the courtyard. The watchman stamps his feet against the cold and looks toward the gate, perhaps expecting the sound of returning hooves. Beyond the walls, the road disappears between hedges and winter fields. A distant chapel bell marks an hour that seems much longer inside a sick room. In the bedchamber, the fire gives a soft crack. The noblewoman closes her eyes again. An attendant remains seated nearby, wrapped in a wool cloak, unwilling to sleep. Perhaps the illness will fade before dawn. Perhaps the physician will arrive. Perhaps nothing more can be done tonight, for all the wealth contained in the room, the embroidered curtains, fine linen, silver vessels, costly remedies, and trusted servants. Tudor night still has limits that money cannot entirely overcome. And even when the body is perfectly well, another kind of disturbance remains. Sometimes there is no fever, no pain, no danger at all, only a mind that refuses to become quiet. Sometimes there is no fever, no pain, and no urgent message waiting beyond the door. The body is warm enough beneath the blankets. The chamber is secure, the fire has not entirely died, and still, sleep refuses to come. For a Tudor noblewoman, wakefulness after midnight can stretch strangely. Without clocks glowing beside the bed, the passing hours are harder to measure. A church bell may offer some guidance, but between its distant notes the night seems almost timeless. Candlelight changes, embers settle, shadows lengthen and disappear. The household grows so quiet that the smallest movement becomes noticeable. A sleeper who cannot rest may first remain behind the curtains. She turns the pillow, pulls the blanket higher, perhaps she listens to the wind, perhaps she waits for tiredness to return. Tudor medical writers have many explanations for sleeplessness: excess heat, troubled digestion, imbalance of the humours, grief, fear, overwork, too much wine, too little exercise, or excessive thought might all be blamed. Some remedies recommend soothing drinks, particular herbs, quiet music, gentle scents, or changes in diet. No one can quite agree on which of these remedies noblewomen regularly followed at home. Medical books preserve elaborate prescriptions. While ordinary household practice may have been far simpler, sometimes the cure for wakefulness is simply getting out of bed for a while. An attendant may notice movement and quietly relight a candle from the remaining embers. The noblewoman sits near the hearth wrapped in a loose nightgown or fur-lined mantle. Cold floorboards or rush-covered stone encourage slippers to be worn even for the shortest journey across the chamber. The room looks different now. During the evening it was filled with servants, fabrics, basins, combs, conversation, and small tasks. At this hour, it has become almost empty. The carved chest appears darker, the wall hanging disappears at its edges, a pewter cup catches the candlelight. The world has narrowed to a few objects within reach. If the noblewoman can read, a book may offer company. Devotional works are natural choices. A psalter, prayer book, collection of sermons, or other religious text may be opened carefully. In literate households, secular reading is also possible, although the availability of particular books depends greatly on wealth and taste. Romances, chronicles, poetry, translations of classical works, and household manuscripts circulate among the elite. Reading by candlelight, however, is not effortless. The flame is small, the lettering may be cramped, eyes become tired, the reader must remain close enough to the candle to see but careful enough not to bring parchment, paper, sleeves, or loose fabric dangerously near the flame. A manuscript written on vellum feels different in the hand from a printed book. The pages are heavier. Illumination may catch the light. A printed volume, increasingly common across the Tudor period, can be smaller and easier to reproduce. Books themselves carry the marks of changing England. Religious volumes acceptable under one monarch may become dangerous under another. A text in Latin may signal old devotional traditions. An English Bible can carry powerful new meaning. Ownership, reading, and interpretation become entangled with the upheavals of the Reformation. But insomnia is rarely interested in theology alone. A restless woman may close the book after only a few pages. She may instead take up sewing. Embroidery is one of the quiet skills expected among many elite women. Fine needlework can decorate clothing, cushions, hangings, book covers, and household textiles. It may also serve as a respectable occupation during long indoor hours. At midnight, however, the work must be simple. Complex stitching requires good light. A noblewoman might repair a small piece, examine work begun earlier, or merely hold fabric while talking softly with an attendant. Needles are valuable enough to be kept carefully. Pins and thread are stored in boxes or cases. Silk thread, gold work, and expensive materials may be reserved for decorative projects, while ordinary linen thread serves more practical needs. There is something naturally repetitive about stitching. The needle passes through fabric, the thread follows. Hands remain occupied while the mind begins to slow. Perhaps this is why quiet textile work has accompanied evening conversation for centuries. If another woman remains awake nearby, the two may talk. Not loudly. The sleeping household should not be disturbed. The conversation may wander through small matters that felt unimportant during daylight. A tenant's request, a daughter's marriage prospects, a servant who wishes to leave, a letter expected from court, the price of cloth, an elderly relative's health. A rumour carried from the market town. Not every noblewoman lives at the centre of the royal politics, but almost every noble family exists somewhere within a web of obligation and uncertainty. Land must be managed, marriages must be negotiated, inheritances must be protected. Loyalty to powerful patrons can bring opportunity and danger in equal measure. Under the Tudors, politics occasionally enters the bedchamber with unusual force. A family may rise quickly through royal favour. It may fall just as quickly. The arrest of a relative, the death of a patron, or a change in religious policy can transform household fortunes. Some chroniclers claim that courtly women were constantly engaged in intrigue, but this exaggerates the experience of many noblewomen whose concerns were more domestic and regional. Still, uncertainty travels. A letter from London can disturb an entire manor. A seal broken at supper may leave someone awake until morning. Night provides no distraction from such thoughts. In daylight there are servants to direct, accounts to examine, meals, prayers, visitors, sewing, estate business, and movement through the house. At night, there is only memory. A woman may think about a husband travelling along dangerous roads, a son serving in another household, a daughter whose marriage is being arranged, a pregnancy not yet publicly announced, a debt, a quarrel, a promise made years earlier. These private worries rarely survive in official history, yet they must have filled countless Tudor nights. Even now, historians continue to debate how much emotional freedom noblewomen possessed inside their households. Letters sometimes reveal affection, frustration, loneliness, ambition, and grief with surprising clarity. At other times, formal language hides almost everything. The silence of the record does not mean the silence of the mind. Beyond the chamber, the manor sleeps on. Kitchen fires have become ash. The great hall is empty except perhaps for servants or animals allowed to remain near its fading warmth. In the stable, horses shift quietly in straw. A porter dozes near the gate, somewhere above the roof line. Smoke drifts into the night and disappears. The village beyond is darker still. A few cottages may retain embers beneath ash so that the morning fire can be revived more easily. Roads are empty. Frost settles long hedges. The market square, noisy by day, lies completely still. Then a bell sounds, slow, distant. The noblewoman pauses. Perhaps she's been awake for an hour, perhaps 3. Without a dependable clock beside her, it hardly matters. The sound reminds her that night is moving, even when it seems motionless. The embroidery is placed aside. The book closes, the candle is burned noticeably lower. An attendant uses the snuffers to remove the blackened tip of the wick, and the flame steadies once more. There is a practical belief that too much mental exertion can disturb sleep. Learned medical advice often recommends moderation in thought as well as food and drink, yet telling a worried mind to become quiet is easier than making it obey. A familiar prayer may help, so may a little warmed drink. A servant might offer diluted wine, ale, or an herbal preparation believed to encourage rest. Some recipes call for lettuce seed or preparations involving poppy. Plants long associated with sleep. Dosage, however, is uncertain, and sensible household practitioners must rely heavily on experience. A simpler remedy is often safer. Warmth, darkness, repetition. The noblewoman returns to bed. Curtains are drawn again, leaving only a narrow opening. The pillow is adjusted. The blanket settles over her shoulders. Outside, wind moves through the trees with less force than before. Clouds drift beyond the moon. A watchman makes another circuit of the walls, though his footsteps are too far away to hear clearly. Then, gradually, the mind begins to release the day. The unfinished letter can wait. The household account can wait. The uncertain news from court can wait. There will be servants awake before sunrise. There will be bells. There will be breakfast, prayers, clothing, visitors, and another long sequence of public obligations. But not yet. For a little longer, the manor belongs to darkness. The candle is extinguished. The chamber disappears. And somewhere between one distant bell and the next, wakefulness finally loosens its hold. The candle has gone out, and for a while the noblewoman's chamber is almost completely dark. Only the faintest red light survives in the hearth. Behind the bed curtains, warmth remains trapped beneath layers of linen and wool, while beyond them the chamber cools steadily. The carved chest, the stool, the abandoned basin, and the folded garments have disappeared into shadow. Objects that carried so much importance during daylight are invisible now. The household has reached its deepest quiet, yet even at this hour it is never entirely asleep. Somewhere near the gate, a porter or watchman remains responsible for listening. In larger residences, guards make rounds through courtyards and passages. Their duties are practical rather than dramatic. They watch for fire, strangers, open doors, unsettled animals, or anything else that seems wrong. Fire is perhaps the greatest nighttime fear. A single neglected candle can ignite a hanging. A spark can fall among dry rushes. A kitchen ember can escape its hearth. Timber frame buildings offer flames abundant fuel, and even stone houses contain wooden roofs, floors, furniture, doors, bedding, and enormous quantities of cloth. For that reason, the final inspection of fires and lights matters. No one can quite agree on how systematically every Tudor household organised these checks. Surviving household regulations give glimpses of careful rules, especially in large establishments, but smaller manors may rely more heavily on habit and trusted servants. The purpose is always the same. The house must survive until morning. In the kitchen, great fires that roasted meat earlier have been reduced to embers. Some heat may deliberately be preserved beneath ash so that the next day's fire can be revived more easily. The cook's world is dark now. Pots stand where they have been cleaned and stored. Knives are put away. Wooden tables bear marks left by years of chopping and kneading. The smell of smoke, grease, bread, onions, and herbs lingers beneath soot-dark rafters. Perhaps a cat moves through the shadows hunting mice. Perhaps a dog sleeps near the last warmth. Elsewhere, servants rest in much simpler conditions than those enjoyed by the noble family. Some sleep on pallets, others share beds. Wool blankets may be worn thin from use. A maid who spent the evening tending her mistress's fire may lie down only a short distance from the room where she will be needed again before sunrise. The sleeping house remains a hierarchy even in darkness. The finest feathers are upstairs, the roughest straw is elsewhere. Yet everyone hears the same winter wind moving across the roof. Beyond the manor walls, an entire landscape is sleeping. The road that carried merchants, messengers, tenants, priests, and travellers through daylight is empty now. Frozen ruts shine beneath the moon. A roadside shrine stands unnoticed beneath bare branches. In the market town, shutters are closed and stalls abandoned until morning. Farther away, monastery buildings that survived the changing Tudor religious world may still follow rhythms shaped by bells and prayer, while many former abbeys have already fallen silent or been transformed into private estates. The century changes quickly. Night changes slowly. People still require blankets. Fires still fade. Darkness still encourages prayer and memory. Inside village cottages, farmers and craftsmen sleep before another early beginning. A shepherd may wake to check animals. A mother shifts beneath coarse blankets when a child moves beside her. Somewhere a baker rises while most neighbours are still asleep, beginning work that will bring warm bread into the morning streets. The noblewoman knows little of these particular movements tonight. She sleeps behind a heavy curtains, but her life is connected to them. The wool in her blankets comes from fields worked by other hands. The wax in her candles begins with bees tended somewhere on an estate. The grain eaten at supper has passed through harvest, mill, cart, kitchen, and oven. The firewood warming her chamber has been cut, stacked, transported, and carried upstairs piece by piece. Even luxury is built from ordinary labour. This may be the quietest truth inside the nighttime rituals of Tudor noblewomen. Their evenings appear private, but almost nothing about them is created alone. A gown requires spinners, weavers, dyers, tailors, merchants, and servants. A basin of warm water requires a well, fuel, a fire, and someone willing to carry it. A clean sheet contains months of work. A fragrant herb begins in soil. Even the silence of a secure bedchamber depends upon people keeping watch outside it. Some chroniclers wrote most eagerly about queens, marriages, conspiracies, executions, and royal births. Such events survive because they altered politics. The ordinary knights rarely do. No writer records every time a tired noblewoman removed her hairpins. No clerk notes every winter evening when a warming pan passed between cold sheets. No official document remembers the faint scent of lavender beside a pillow. Even now, historians continue to debate many details because the most repeated parts of life were often the least likely to be written down. People recorded what seemed unusual. Routine disappeared, and yet routine is where most lives were actually lived. Hundreds, perhaps thousands, of evenings passed in much the same way. Candles were lit, doors were closed, jewels were removed, hands were washed, hair was combed, prayers were spoken, blankets were arranged. Then darkness came. Perhaps that repetition explains why nighttime customs reveal something that portraits cannot. Painted Tudor noblewomen look permanent. Their gowns remain bright. Their jewels never move. Their expressions remain composed century after century. But the women themselves grew tired. Their feet became cold. Their hair tangled. Their skin cracked in winter. They worried about children and letters and illness. They listened to rain. They woke from unpleasant dreams. And eventually, like everyone else in the sleeping manor, they waited for morning. The first sign of it may arrive without light. A rooster calls somewhere beyond the walls. Another answers from a farm farther away. The watchman notices that the eastern sky has begun to lose its darkness. In the servants' rooms, someone wakes. A kitchen worker pulls on clothing in the cold. Ash is disturbed. A buried ember glows brighter. Kindling catches. Soon smoke begins rising once more from the chimneys. A bell sounds across the fields. Inside the noblewoman's chamber, dawn remains hidden behind shutters and bed curtains. For a few more moments, she sleeps. The herbs near the pillow have lost some of their scent. The fire has nearly vanished. Folded gowns wait inside their chests. Pins and combs lie ready. Before long, attendants will return or water will arrive, linen will be changed, hair will be arranged. Layers of clothing will rebuild the public figure who disappeared the previous evening, But that belongs to another day. For now, the manor rests between darkness and dawn, and the private world of the Tudor night begins gently to fade. The stone walls grow pale as morning gathers beyond them. Mist rests over the fields, softening roads, hedges, churches, and distant woodland until the countryside seems almost without edges. Somewhere, a cartwheel will soon turn through the mud. Somewhere, market shutters will open. Somewhere, bells will call people back into the measured duties of the day. But there is no need to follow them. The candles of this long evening have burned away. The last watchfire sinks into ash. The noblewoman, her attendants, the servants below, the villagers beyond the walls, and generations whose names were never written into chronicles all drift farther from us now. Their footsteps disappear along quiet corridors. Their voices fade from candlelit halls. The scent of beeswax and rosemary becomes only memory. Centuries pass as softly as mist over a winter field. Stone houses empty. Wooden chests darken with age. Bed curtains decay. Roads change course. Abbey bells fall silent, ring again, or are replaced by other bells in other towers. Yet for one peaceful night, we have followed those small rituals that history almost forgot, and now they too can rest. May the distant bells grow softer. May the old roads disappear into darkness. May the final ember settle gently beneath the ash. And wherever you are listening tonight, may the quiet of that sleeping Tudor world follow you comfortably toward your own sleep.